Some time ago, I was looking through my social media accounts and found a very interesting post. Zool Smith, who you might know as the creator of Classic Offensive and all-around an excellent CSGO modder, made this Counter-Strike Global Offensive Iceberg back in November of 2022. If you don't know what an iceberg chart is, I'll give you the condensed version.
An iceberg chart is an internet meme where trivia, theories, and other pieces of information, commonly called entries, are put over an image of an iceberg. The deeper an entry is, the more obscure or unknown the topic is. This meme resembles an iceberg in the way that it's harder to see in the dark waters the deeper you go, and it's bigger under the surface than it is on the tip.
To keep the viewers intrigued, it's read from top to bottom. Nowadays, in 2026, CSGO is no more and we have CS2 instead. But you'd be surprised by how many of the topics on Zool's image are still relevant to this day. Because of this, I will be using CS2 footage where applicable. I also think it's very cool to look in the past and see how people might have thought about the game. Alright, let's take a look at this, shall we? SG556. This weapon is an SG556. It's called an SG556 in the game files, and its model is based on the SIG SG556. However, in both CSGO and CS2, it's referred to by the game as the SG553. The real SG553 is an upgraded version of the SG552, which you might recognize from older CS titles. Scoped Galil. In the development versions of CSGO, the Galil used to have a scope. It would function much like the scopes in older titles, lowering your FOV instead of actually looking through it like nowadays with the scoped rifles. You can try this gun for yourself if you download the C-Strike 1.5 version of CSGO, also known as the PAX or Alpha version. Left 4 Dead 2 demolition maps. Valve and their contractors love recycling assets. As such, when CSGO was being made, the game used a lot of Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2 assets. For example, the AK model and sound, or the destructible doors on Nuke. The most known example of this are the maps for the Demolition game mode. If you don't know what Demolition was, rest in peace Demolition 2023, never forget, it was a 6v6 mode on maps with one bomb site. Everyone would start with a free weapon, and if they got a kill in the round, their weapon would get downgraded for the next round. If they got more than one, they would get a grenade, depending on the number of kills, a flashbang, HE or Molotov. Most of the maps used for Demolition used assets or entire areas of Left 4 Dead 2, which I will list now. A bank refurnishes this Burger Tang restaurant from the Hard Rain campaign as, well, a bank. A lake is based on or inspired by this lake house at the end of Death Toll. Safe House's assets are based on the farmhouse from the finale of Blood Harvest. According to the wiki, St. Mark's layout is loosely based on the first map of Swamp Fever, but the assets could be borrowed from the parish. Sugarcane is based off one of the buildings in Hard Rain. This one is, at least to me, the most obvious copy. Lastly, again according to the wiki, there's been a cut map called Alleyway, based on the apartments of No Mercy. Source 2. Source 2 is the newest game engine by Valve, a successor to their Source engine. It has been rumored and requested that CSGO, which runs on Source, is ported to Source 2 for years. Leaks and tech demos of the engine date as far back as 2010, and the first ever game to be ported to Source 2 was Dota 2 in 2015. In 2020, Valve released Half-Life Alyx, the first Half-Life game in 13 years and a technological marvel, really showing what Valve's new engine was capable of. Understandably, CSGO players have been huffing on hopium for years. until 2023 when Counter-Strike 2 was announced, finally updating the engine and rebranding the game. However, the launch has been plagued with countless bugs, performance decreases and the lack of content. One of the worst aspects of the game is that it's not rewritten from scratch. Instead of being a clean slate for the developers, they brought many of the same mistakes and issues that might have been limiting them in the past. But hopefully, Valve will eventually regain some interest in Counter-Strike. Perfect World. Perfect World is a Chinese company that co-published CSGO and Dota 2 in China. The Perfect World version of CSGO, released in 2017, was interesting in a couple ways. Instead of buying the game, you can verify your identity and get the game for free. You can only play with other Perfect World players on Perfect World servers. The version has 2 unique sticker capsules and 1 graffiti capsule. And most famously, the game removes a lot of the violence and quote-unquote gore, like skulls from skins and stickers. Also, in 2018, the game got a full Chinese localization, including every voice line, which I think is very cool, and it would be interesting to have different language options in CS2. Lastly, the company hosted the 2024 Perfect World Shanghai Major tournament for CS2. Hidden server commands. To be honest, I'm not sure what this entry refers to, but I have 3 theories. Theory 1. It refers to commands that exist in the game, but they won't be automatically suggested when typing. These are commands such as the give command, which is acknowledged by the game, but nothing you type after is. My favorite example is +look at weapon, which makes you inspect your gun. Theory 2. Commands that control the server. These commands start with the prefix sv_, host_, and mp_, and allow you to control stuff ranging from the likes of the round timer, round start money, through changing gravity, adding bots, and even the timescale of the server. The reason they might be called hidden is because they are only accessible through the developer console. Theory 3. Cheat protected commands. These are not to be confused with cheats, meaning external programs that allow you to do illegal things such as aimbot or wallhack. In-game cheats are built in and only accessible when the admin of the server sets sv_cheats to 1. These include God mode, no clip, infinite ammo and other goodies like sv show impacts or r draw other models that are usually for helping devs. Now we're dipping below the sea surface. Customizable player models. This entry is probably referring to the fact that in older Counter-Strikes you could choose between 4 different player models on each side, or 5 in CSCZ, while in CSGO you were assigned a player model from one of the factions dictated by the map. In CS2 the only default models are an SAS for CT and a Phoenix for T. However, ever since Operation Shattered Web in 2019, you can buy custom player models called agents. They used to drop from operations, but nowadays you can only get them from the market. In 2020, Valve also introduced patches, which are basically stickers for your agent. Left 4 Dead 2 weapons. As previously mentioned, CSGO, especially in its early days, used a ton of assets from other Valve projects, mainly Left 4 Dead 2. The weapons are no exception to this, and I don't think it's far-fetched to say that it's very likely that the guns that CSGO shares with Left 4 Dead 2 were straight up reused or used as a base for the CSGO model. Let me show you what I mean. The P220 could have served as a basis for the P250's model. I am convinced that the Glock 26 was a basis for CSGO Glock, as it's a hack of a compact Glock pistol with a long barrel. Something like the C-Strike 1.5 Glock looks like a direct rip to me. The Deagle is straight up the same model, only thankfully downsized for CSGO. It was also given an uglier finish in my opinion. The wooden shotgun could have served as a base for the sawed-off shotgun. The Mag-10 looks almost identical to the CSGO model, minus the silencer and zip-tied flashlight. The M4 shotgun could again be a basis for the XM1014, but they decreased its size a bit too much. Also, in the alpha, its color was a lot closer to the Left 4 Dead 2 model. The G3 is an obvious base for the CSGO model. The M16 could have easily been a base for both the M4s, but this is the one where I think they modeled from scratch. Its color is closer to the A1S, but that one was introduced after the release of the game, so I assume Valve made an entirely new model. The Scar L's most obvious use was the cut Scar 17 weapon from the CSGO Alpha, but it also probably served as a basis for the Scar 20. And lastly, the AK was obviously just directly used for CSGO along with the sound, with some minor texture changes. Crasswater's Scars. Captain Crasswater is one of the purchasable agents released back in Operation Riptide. He's obviously based on the guerrilla warfare faction of previous games. You can get two variants, Crasswater the Forgotten, resembling the old guerrilla warfare, or medium rare Crasswater, where he doesn't have his vest and has some camouflage body paint. His left arm, left side of his chest and left side of his face are heavily scarred, with his eye also being damaged. According to his description in-game and on the market, he's an ex-SEAL Team 6 captain who was captured and developed severe Stockholm Syndrome, after which he joined the guerrilla warfare faction and carried a series of attacks on Western embassies. Recently, he's been growing new guerrilla warfare cells in Central America. To me, he looks like he's been burned, so he could have been in an explosion, possibly when attacking an embassy. Some of his scars, like these on his face and these on his shoulder, look like cuts, so it might be also possible that he got tortured with a blowtorch and a knife during his initial capture. Then again, the damage is only on one side of his body, so maybe they are cuts made by glass or shrapnel that hit him during the explosion. Magicrope. The only result my googling has brought looks like a meme started by Zool himself about 6 years ago on the r/CS mapmakers subreddit. However, the now defunct Reddit has a link to a Discord server, so I decided to join and ask around, and I actually got some answers. One from Wazanator, who just remembered the word as a shitpost started by Zool, confirming my initial theory. But unexpectedly, I just woke up the day after writing this thing and I've got another reply. A member by the name 9YZ actually remembers the whole thing, so here's the explanation. In Source Engine games, some entity's data gets a reset at the end of the round. For example, a breakable prop will reappear, while some don't. If you've ever played Vertigo, you know that there are counters on CT and T-spawn which display the number of times that players fell off the side of the map. To implement this, Valve used one of the entities that don't get a reset every round, which was the move_rope entity. This has a script attached, and every time someone is killed by the trigger hurt on the edge of the map, it tells it to add 1 to the counter. Because a move rope doesn't reset on round start, it keeps the data stored. This move rope entity was named magicrope in the Hammer editor, and Zool decided to make a meme out of it. To be perfectly honest, as a CS 1.6 mapper, scripts do seem like magic to me, so it's not far off. So thanks a lot for the help. If you wanna dig deeper, I'm putting the whole conversation in the description. It is very interesting, and I feel like I can't explain it better. Beta weapon names. In the alpha and beta versions of the game, the weapons used fake names, presumably to avoid copyright issues. For whatever reasons, some of the names aren't the same as in the previous games, and obviously there are new names for new guns. Some of my favorite examples include the Cobra 18 for Glock, Medved 19 for the PP19 Bison, or Straptech 9mm for Tech 9. You can see the full list here. Low violence mode. You might know that in Germany, until the 2010s, video game violence was heavily censored. Because of this, Valve created a low violence mode for the game, which would replace the death ragdoll with a surrender animation, with the characters just sticking their hands up and then lying face down. This version was never properly released though, as the German video game violence laws were lifted. You could also argue that CSGO Perfect World Edition has a kind of low violence mode, because all of the blood and the headshot sparks are colored black. Alternatively, if you're willing to go older than CSGO, the older games had a content lock option, where you'd set a password so your 5-year-old kid couldn't go play CS and get PTSD from the bloody murder scenes, I guess. First shotgun shell reloads faster. For whatever reason, the first shell is loaded, then there's a delay, then the rest of the shells start loading. Here's 3Clicks Philip talking about this way back in 2016.
But not all shells are created equally. The second shell when reloading a shotgun takes twice as long as the others.
We're going deeper and deeper into the trivia. Gabe's radio message. In both CSGO and CS2, there's a radio in T-spawn of Office playing a news interview about the hostage situation in the office building. The person whose voice we can hear is none other than Gabe and
to enter the office and attempt a daring hostage rescue. A particular, but 4 people are unaccounted for.
Scrolling items in cases aren't real. You know how YouTubers will be so disappointed when a skin they wanted flies by when the case is rolling and they get a blue instead? Well, it should be obvious, but they aren't real. They are merely there to look more like a slot machine and bait you into opening just one more case. Fun fact, you could previously get baited by a knife. But Valve went out and specifically coded it so that none of the bogus items that roll by are rare special items. Giant error model. These hilarious giant walls of error are most likely buggy models. This bug has been encountered when hosting a server with plugins, mapping, or viewing bugged demos. Not sure what causes this specific one to appear, usually a model with an error uses this familiar text. Retextured CSS hostages. Not really sure about this one. The CSS hostages could work as a basis for the CSGO ones, particularly these two, but I don't think that's the case here. They just seem too different. But if you know, please leave me a comment. Unused high definition C4. This seems to have been a bit of a pet peeve of Zul's. The C4 in CSGO doesn't look all that amazing. However, the trailer for the game used a different, great looking model. The reason why it went unused is probably polygon limits. They could have added the model later in CSGO's lifetime, but chose not to. It was a bit disappointing to see that the CS2 bomb is basically just a repainted CSGO bomb. Rest in peace, CSGO trailer bomb model. DE Vostok. DE Vostok is a map in CSCZ. It shares assets with the Building Recon mission from CSCZ deleted scenes set in Latvia. It was remade for CSGO and renamed to DE Balkan, but it was cut after the beta. This CSGO remake was based on a flag found in the map, set in Romania instead, although it contains some assets with Cyrillic text, while Romania uses Latin script. Motion controls. It is relatively well known that CSGO had controller support. What you might not know is that you could control the game with the gyroscope of the PS4 controller. XM1014 pumping sound. I swear I remember researching and finding this back when I stumbled upon this Iceberg. The XM1014 supposedly has an unused pumping sound somewhere in the game files. It is pumped in Left 4 Dead 2, so maybe it was a leftover at some point. Cut factions. Before CSGO released, there were many planned or even implemented factions that were cut in the end. Now, I just wanna clarify that this section is heavily taken from the Counter-Strike wiki and my research yielded no other results, so sorry for copying all your homework, but here we go. For the terrorists, these were Akunin or Eikunin, members of organized Japanese crime groups. This faction appeared in CSCZ-DS and concept art was created during the development of CSGO, as well as parts of model files, which are unfortunately unsalvageable. Arctic Avengers appeared in every CS game before CSGO, however, concept art can be found. It is also worth saying that custom Arctic Avengers models were made for FM Pone's map Sub-Zero, but despite this map being accepted into the game, the models weren't. Cultural Revolutionaries. Name-wise based on the Red Guards, a paramilitary organization led by Mao Zedong during the Chinese Cultural Revolution in the 60s. Their clothes more closely resemble the Lao People's Liberation Army, a Viet Cong counterpart from Laos. Only concept art remains. The Entrenched, Central Asian, probably Himalayan. Only concept art remains. Freedom Fighters. Mentions of the faction were added in the game files in Operation Wildfire in 2016. No concept art is known, but the game files do contain a description. A mysterious faction with unclear and potentially violent motive. While ostensibly claiming a cause of freedom, these fighters are nonetheless heavily armed. It is possible that this faction was intended as the enemy for some of the co-op missions. Insurgents. Stereotypical, vaguely Middle Eastern terrorists. Only concept art remains. Intifada. Likely based on Palestinian uprisings against Israel. Only concept art remains. Jungle Marxists. Likely based on the FARC-EP, a Colombian Marxist-Leninist guerrilla group. Soldiers of Fortune. Some files mentioning these words appeared in the game files in Operation Riptide. Could have been cut agents. For the counter-terrorists, these were CIA, obviously based on USA's Central Intelligence Agency. Only concept art remains. Contractor, mercenary for hire military force. Only concept art remains. Georgian Riot Police. If you're easily scared and you're listening to this at 3 AM while making a sandwich, this is a bad time to glance at your screen. Easily the scariest thing in all of CSGO, for real though, the USSR had no chill with their gas mask designs. I'll leave a video in the description if you wanna stay awake after you finish this one. The Georgian Riot Police have fully developed models. You can find them in the C-Strike 1.5 version of CSGO on the map Train. They also have an unused description, which I won't read because it's too long and not because I can't pronounce the capital of Georgia, and definitely not because this guy is staring at me from behind my Word document window. KSK, or Kommando Spezialkräfte, were cut from the game but later reintroduced as an agent. MPSSC, or Military Police Special Service Company, have this description. Military Police Special Service Company, aka Yeying, Nighthawk, a classified Taiwanese Special Operations Force under the Ministry of National Defense, rumored to receive training at the Ranger School at Fort Benning, Georgia. The model can be found in the beta game files, but it lacks textures. PLA, or People's Liberation Army, has only concept art remaining. Scuba, a cut faction with only concept art remaining. However, the Seal Frogmen added in Operation Riptide are essentially the same, perhaps even directly being inspired by the cut content. UEI, or Unidad Especial de Intervención, is a special unit of the Spanish Guardia Civil. Only concept art remains. This amount of factions really puts the global in Global Offensive. It's also interesting that there are concepts from different time periods. But if you wanna talk CS2, it's even more tragic, as many of the map-based factions don't have agents, thus they are sadly cut. If you wanna get really anal, you could argue that factions which appeared in previous titles also classify as cut, but I'm not gonna stretch this segment any further, so let's move on. Panorama. Panorama is a UI framework developed by Valve. It was added to CSGO in 2018 and the whole UI was reworked. According to the Valve developer community, it enables rapid development, high quality and high performance interfaces, as well as seamless integration with game content, 3D models, particles, etc. That last comment would explain why they added the dude to our menu screens. This UI framework is still being used in CS2. Also, if you didn't know, the old UI style is called Scaleform. DZ Fall. DZ Fall is a cut danger zone map planned to be released before Operation Broken Fang. You can find references to it in the files of the co-op missions from Operation Broken Fang. It would probably look quite similar to these maps. Now we're getting into the really deep stuff. AR Baloney, DE Glass, DE TV Station. These maps were referred to in the game files in a 2017 update, but were never released, and we know almost nothing about them except 2 light props in the game files under the folder DE TV Station. C4 Bipping Music Layer. I have next to no idea what this means. The only thing that comes to mind is the bomb countdown music.
It's going to explode.
Most people turn off all music, but you can fully turn it on or individually turn on the tracks which play after planting the bomb and when it has 10 seconds to explode. These tracks will also correspond to your music kit, whether it be one of the default ones or a custom one. This can help you tell how long before the bomb explodes, which can be useful, for example when deciding whether to defuse without a kit. But I seriously doubt that this is the case, since, for one, it's too obvious to be this low down on the Iceberg, and number 2, the name doesn't really refer to music kits. Problem is, I just don't know what it's referring to, so if you have any information, let me know. TAC 21, Scar 17, Striker, Crossbow. The first 3 are all cut weapons from CSGO. The Crossbow is one of the many cut weapons from CSCZ. The TAC 21 is a chassis for upgrading sniper rifles. Files referencing it appeared in 2014 and a few more have popped up over the years. We actually have quite a good picture about how it would function thanks to Escalation, and his video is in the description. The Scar 17 was previously mentioned. It is basically an asset recycled from Left 4 Dead 2 and was in the beta before being cut out. It occupied the M4A4 slot and you can try it for yourself in the C-Strike 1.5 version. Its silhouette also appears in the CSGO logo. The Striker could have been an interesting alternative to the XM1014, as it's also semi-automatic in real life, but to be honest, it does look a bit ugly. The Crossbow was supposed to appear in one of the first renditions of CSCZ, but ultimately did not make the cut. It would fire bolts with poisoned tips that would give the player damage over time. Xbox CSS port. Nowadays, I wouldn't have placed this into the deepest depths of the iceberg because I feel like it's fairly well known. Basically, Valve hired a contractor, Hidden Path Entertainment, to breathe a bit of life into Counter-Strike Source and port it onto consoles to compete with the big shooters of the time like Call of Duty or Battlefield. However, Valve soon changed their mind and took over the project themselves, making it into a fully fledged release for both PC and Xbox 360. As you know, the PC game received frequent updates throughout its lifespan, but the Xbox port was abandoned, stuck on the release version. This would explain the full controller support that the game has, and it would prove useful when playing on a Steam Deck. Cobblestone, but not Trainyard. In CS 1.6, maps didn't have these fancy icons with their name, you only saw the file name in the map selection menu. Mappers often included the full names of their maps in the map description instead. An example of this is Cobblestone, which has the file name de_cbble and was still referred to as Cobblestone until it was removed with CS2. DE Train, however, is referred to as just Train up to this day, even though its full name is Trainyard. Just a side note, my favorite example of this shortening file names is CS_tire, which is actually called War-Torn Retirement Home. Odd map scaling. This can mean one of two things. If you're a 1.6 player, the maps of CSGO and CS2 might seem weirdly scaled to you. This is because in Gold Source, characters are shorter, thus their view is lower down. not to mention that the player camera is in the neck and not the face. This means that the angle from which you're viewing stuff is different, so even though the maps are scaled up for Source and subsequent versions, it might all seem a little off. Also, if you play a direct port of a CS 1.6 map to the Source or Source 2 engine, everything seems really small. Second theory, some things are very tall in CSGO and CS2. This is because of three things. Your perspective on a computer screen is very different than in real life. If you play on 16:9, you're cramming 106 degrees of your field of vision into a small rectangle, which is quite significant. That's why if you visit a familiar map in VR, it all looks so huge. Stuff like doorways is way taller in the map than they are in real life, but you don't perceive them to be. The next reason is that the Counter-Strike characters can jump really high, so things like crates might seem shorter than they really are if you brought them into real life. Lastly, in Counter-Strike you run by default. This means that distances are perceived as shorter than they really are. The average human walking speed is 5 km per hour, which is quite the difference to the 21 km per hour run with a knife, at least if my calculations are correct. Again, playing in VR will change your perspective on this, so if you have a headset, fire up Dust 2 in Gmod, don't forget to install CSS and go exploring. Strider sounds in Danger Zone. Danger Zone's second ever map, Sirocco, has ambient sounds in the caves under the main hill, which sound a lot like the Striders from the Half-Life series. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you can believe that this is Half-Life 3 confirmed, or as it would turn out, a Half-Life Alyx confirmed.
To be seen in this map. So maybe it's an Easter egg of some kind. Half-Life VR confirmed.
Okay, Philip, relax. Missing texture. Only info about this is a thread of comments under Zul's initial post, which leads me to believe it's just a joke. It is impossible for the missing texture to be missing, as it's not really a texture. Instead, the Source and Source 2 engines are hard-coded to make every surface that is missing a texture display the classic purple and black checkerboard. This video took way too long to make. Hello everyone, and thank you for watching this far. If you have anything to add or have any questions about the Iceberg, write to me in the comments. If you're watching this and your name happens to be Zulsmith, I hope you're not too mad that I borrowed your thing. As to what I've been up to, basically this video started as a script back in July of 2025. I recorded the voiceovers on the same day and then just kind of lost interest and motivation in YouTube. I started editing sometime in autumn 2025 with a planned release before New Year's, but that didn't really work out. I picked it up again about 2 weeks ago and finally drove it home. Considering that the last real video was published over a year ago, I think it's about time. Originally, there was a different outro, where, among other things, I talked about how my CS 1.6 nomenclature video reached 50,000 views. Right now, it's sitting at almost 52,000. This is so insane to me, and I'm happy to see so many people who are still interested in old stuff like this. But anyway, that'll be all from me for today. Hopefully the next video will take less than a year to make. I'll see you all then. Cultural revolutionaries during the Chinese Cultural Revolution in the 60s.